Go, Tim.
Good morning, afternoon, whatever it is in your beautiful country world, wherever you're at. We're going to have a blast today. We got three of my best friends. We got Tony Fortunato, who is one of my best friends. We have all kinds of fun together harassing everybody. We have Brad Reinboldt of Viavi Solutions. Trust me, this is a great group to work with. And Denny Mew, who's a good friend, and he is our MC today. So, Mr. Denny, take it away.
Thank you, Tim. And hi, Tony. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
I've been away, and thank you for substituting for me a few times. And I want to welcome Brad back to the fold. Brad, it's been 2 years, and we had some crazy time, and I really I want to just give you a big welcome. And so you're now with a different company, but it's actually the same company.
That's right. And first of all, yeah, it's been 2 long years, Denny. 2 years since you invited me. What did I say to you 2 years ago on Halloween? Remember? Boy, you know, I was racking my brain, racking it. Like, what did I say? But no, just kidding.
He doesn't send flowers.
Yeah. But no, thank you very much for inviting me back. I really appreciate the opportunity. I've worked with Tony quite a bit, and of course, Tim and I are buds. We go way back as well. And so, no, we're here today to talk a little bit about Wireshark, the Wireshark community. And I work for a company called Viavi Solutions. I've been in this business for nearly 8 years now, and the company's names keep changing, but I keep doing the same thing, which is to solve performance management challenges with a range of tools, often beginning with Wireshark. And so the focus for myself today is to talk with Tony and you all and kind of better understand and inform the Wireshark community on various tactics and tools and ways they can use that solution to get to the bottom of their problems. And so I'm looking forward to doing that today with you all.
Okay, good. So just to get our viewers orientated, we're talking about this event called the Wireshark Week. So explain to us what's going to happen physically, where it's going to be, or is it all on the web?
Yeah, sure. It's web-based, and so this is our 3rd year that Viavi Solutions had something called Wireshark Week. And so what we do is every day of the week, from November 6th through the 11th, twice a day, we invite folks who are currently using Wireshark to learn some tips of the trade from experts like Tony to really use that tool better and better understand and characterize their network and improve their overall performance. And it's a great tool, but it's a tool, as Tony will get to in a couple of minutes, that out of the box can use a couple of tweaks and a couple augmentations or add-ins that will really improve the overall experience of the user. And so we think it's a great starting tool for an organization. It should be part of their toolbox. But we here at Viavi Solutions also sell some products that really tie in very nicely with Wireshark. And
so if anyone wants to join that, how do they get an invite? How do they sign up for this?
Yeah, they can go out to our website, and we'll also slide at the end. But we have at viavisolutions.com, they can go out there, and at the banner you'll see a opportunity to sign up and register for the various ones over the weekend. We'll show at the end, each day we focus on a different part of Wireshark and its capabilities and how to maximize its value for different angles of performance monitoring and management, including security, by the way. And so viavisolutions.com, and at the end we will show a slide that gives you more information in terms of how to sign up for those and how to partake in them.
Okay, good. So so let's get started. So Tony is kind of, I guess, the owner in a way, and he would be one of the
victim. Either the victim or the honorary. Either the victim or the honorary.
In some circles, they're the same.
Yep.
So go ahead and set Tony up and see. So get our audience a little bit more information about what's going to happen in Wireshark Week then.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've kind of laid the groundwork about Wireshark and the overall community. And so Tony and I have talked about this, and one of the things I'm going to ask Tony is just a couple questions, kind of lead questions that allow him to sort of show Wireshark and show, again, some simple things you can do to really improve that experience. So Tony, first question, what are the top challenges that you see being a Wireshark expert and that the community has with respect to downloading that Wireshark free application and starting to use it? What are things that you tell a first user in terms of making that a better experience for them?
Right.
Well, you hit it right on the head. The first thing I tell people is it's just a tool. And just the best analogy I can give people is we can all sit there with a pocket knife and a piece of wood, but very few of us can actually carve something recognizable. So tools are tools. And the only thing that makes you better with a tool is a whole lot of practice and a bunch of training. So that's the top challenge, right? Top challenge is just convincing people that they can download this thing for free. It is a great tool, but without practice, without education or training of any kind, you're kind of in the dark, right? And we've all done that. You hit start on Wireshark, you get a screen full of stuff, and you kind of glaze over and go, now what?
Yep, I've experienced that. Absolutely, Tony.
Right? So you get all those packets on the screen, and then after that, people kind of freeze up, they get discouraged, and they kind of just, they walk away from it. So to me, that's pretty well it. Once you get over that hump, and you get a little bit of education out of your belt, and a little bit of the fear of I'm going to break something out of your head, then you're typically in good shape, and you can move forward from there.
Okay, makes sense. Any particular advice that you would give or suggestions? I don't know if you want to share your screen, but maybe things that you would do right out of the box if you install a new fresh version of Wireshark. Is there a couple of things that you would do off the top of your head?
Yeah, sure. Here, I'll share my Wireshark. There you go. So now everybody should be seeing that.
Now, one of the first things I do, Brad, is I go to the wireshark.org site. There's all kinds of information there.
Yeah,
So
Wireshark.org is a great site.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that again? What was that website? I interrupted you.
Wireshark.org.
The Wireshark.org. Thank you.
Yeah, the other, and this is going to dovetail into exactly what Tim said. The first thing I show people is the help button, believe it or not. The help button gives you the website, it gives you the wiki, and a whole bunch of sample captures, because sometimes you want to look at a capture and you don't have that protocol or device nearby. Just that alone is huge. People don't even understand how helpful that help button is. The second thing I do is, believe it or not, this is going to sound so trivial, but for people starting, this is a big deal. And you go to help and about, the folders. And this shows you where all your stuff is. So anything from filters, configuration, preferences, manufacturer ID for MAC addresses, it's all here. And you don't have to hunt for it, because that's one of the biggest complaints people have with Wireshark is, where are my config files? It's all right here. If you want to know the keyboard shortcuts, bang, click on that, and there's all your key. Just print that. Do a screen capture and stick it up on your wall. These are all little things that get people going. And then the last thing I get people going with is under Edit, Preferences. This screen alone, if you don't do this right, then you're going to be looking at stuff cross-eyed for the rest of the day and not understand what you're looking at. So the first thing I show people is obviously the layout, how you want to see your screen. People don't even understand that you can change your layout. This is the pizza box style, which most people are familiar with. But as you get better with Wireshark, you're probably going to want a different kind of layout. I typically use this one when I'm troubleshooting. This is a very popular one where you have the number 1 and 2 and 3 on top of each other. Fonts and colors. This, again, if you're over the age of 30, you probably want to change the font if it's too small. But please don't pick anything too extravagant like calligraphy or something like that. You'll get a migraine by the end of the day.
Hey, Tony, are you making? Sorry, I don't see your screen changing. Am I just, maybe it's a Reinboldt problem, but I didn't see your screen changing.
Yeah, I didn't.
Let me reshare that. See if Google likes me today. Let me do this again.
Yeah, because it's frozen.
That's me.
Okay, that's you.
Let me try this again. And now you should see. There you go.
Yes. Sorry, you might want to back up a bit. Sorry, and show that. Now I can see it.
There you go. So there's the layout screen I was talking about. This is the pizza box style. And this is the layout that I was referring to a moment ago. Your fonts and colors. This is where you change your font if you're over the age of 30, because sometimes it's a smaller font because you have a smaller font and you have smaller eyes. As you get older, they get smaller. The capture, this is where you pick your default adapter. So instead of having to remember to pick Wi-Fi, for example, or your Ethernet or your VMware, set it by default. You don't have to worry about it again.
Right.
This is where people get into trouble. Name resolution. And this is where we resolve the MAC address. So you see IBM or Cisco or HP or whatever at the beginning of the MAC address. Turn that on or off. The big deal with these are if you have problems dropping packets, sometimes when you disable all of these, that's just enough to get Wireshark more time to do stuff. That's all. Again, I'm just kind of quickly going through this. And this is the last one, protocols. So under the protocol screen, I tell people, jokingly, just take 2 seconds, take a look at this and find out what else Wireshark can do for you. For example, in the IEEE section, you can actually see there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do with the wireless packet, as well as set some decryption keys. People don't even know that. And that's a great way to start. If you have web-based applications that are not using port 80 that Wireshark kind of misses and just says it's TCP, well, you can actually put HTTP port numbers right in this configuration dialog box. So it can decode your packets. So there's a whole lot of stuff just to get started that I like to spend. And in the real world, I would spend a good half hour on this screen with a whole bunch of examples so people understand why to do it and when to do it, not opposed to just being, click on the button and hope for the best kind of thing, right? That's just getting started.
Sure. So what do you have an example of how could you bring up your Wireshark as you have it configured with just a screen maybe showing what that looks like and maybe explain some of the data that one can see with Wireshark? I mean, just as anecdotal.
Sure. Here we go. I'm just going to randomly start a capture right now for my adapter. This is another trick I show people with Microsoft systems. You can rename your adapters. People don't even know that little trick. When you go to network connection sharing, instead of saying LAN 1, LAN 2, Ethernet 1 or 2, you can actually put like killer is what I gave my Ethernet card. So it sticks out like a sore thumb. Docking station. So it doesn't say LAN 6. It actually says docking station. So on and so on. It's a really neat little tip that you can use with most applications. So I'm just going to go to killer. And before I hit capture, this is another big tip for people that Tim probably is going to like to hear as well. You go to your capture options. That's the gear at the top, or you do Control K. And you get a list of all your adapters. And this is where you can control things like your packet slicing. So instead of capturing the full frame, there's many times when you don't want the full frame. A great example for that is for legal reasons. You may be able to see the IP addresses and the port numbers, but you might not be allowed to see the content of the data. So this is where you could slice your packets, for example, 128 bytes, and you would actually not capture that extra data. The byproduct, when you capture less bytes of that packet, now your trace files are a lot smaller. So with a full-size packet, you might have a 100 meg trace file. With only 128 byte slice, it may only be like 12 meg. So this is a great little tip to have for that. And another good reason to slice your packets, you might be looking at data that you'll never be able to decode and decrypt. So what's the point of capturing all that extra garbage, right?
That makes sense, Tony.
I'm going to double click. I'm going to hit start. And now you just see a bunch of random stuff on your screen, right? I'm just going to hit stop for a moment because that's plenty. That's enough. And if you notice, the first thing I teach people is you go to view and you turn off the details and you turn off the bytes. And you're left with this basic thing called a list. Why? I can see patterns now. I don't need to see 3 times the nonsense, right? So when you do that, things tend to jump out at you a little more. And if you noticed, I've got a very simple font. I don't have a colorized background. And I have the very, very minimal amount of columns that I'll ever want. If you ever want to add a column, then obviously we can go back to the packet details. We turn it on when we need it. We go back to our list, and you might want to have the, for example, time to live. Right click. We're going to add that as a column. And now we have the time to live. So if you were troubleshooting routing loops, if you're troubleshooting flapping routes, if you're troubleshooting some kind of backup route that might wake up in the middle of the day and slow things down, this is a great tip off on how to do it and a great example of picking one field name and putting it up on your screen. When you're done, view, turn it off, and you're back there again. So when people see my screen, they say, that looks pretty boring. And I said, yeah, that's what I want. I want to concentrate on the problem. I don't need the flash, the bang, the animation, the funky fonts, and the psychedelic colors. I'm only going to get a migraine, right? At my age, I can barely concentrate on what I'm doing as it is, so I don't want any distractions.
Makes sense. Well, it's interesting, too. There's just a wealth of data there, but you want to tailor it in a manner that's appropriate for the particular troubleshooting situation that you're involved with. And I think you've said that much probably clearer than I have, but there's just a lot there. Wireshark is a great tool. The Wireshark community obviously has been adding these capabilities over many, many years, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and the big one that came up a few years ago that people still haven't caught on to, in the bottom right corner of the Wireshark screen, there's something called a profile. So you can actually set all the layout, all the parameters you want for your screen, and you can give it a profile name like troubleshooting, baselining, VoIP, security. whatever you want to call it. And when you use that profile, it'll reformat your screen and your font and your columns any way you want. So you don't have to remember what columns do I use for performance versus latency versus jitter versus security versus, you don't have to keep regurgitating that in your brain. You just click the profile, select the profile, off you go. Another really tiny tip that a lot of people just haven't gravitated to until they start playing with it, then they realize the value of that neat little feature.
So Tony, I just want to make a comment that in the future, if you have Tim and I on the show, you cannot use the phrase "at my age," because for Tim and I, distraction is all we live for now.
I didn't get any of that. I was distracted. Can you say that again?
Smart ass. Now, one thing when I first tell people about Wireshark, first off, Wireshark is an application running on your computer. If your computer is doing 35,000 things, which is often what's going on, they got LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and whatever else on, it slows down the application's capability of responding appropriately. And also, Tony, I know you hate me for this, but I do it all the time. If you want to know what's going on in your network, get a tap. Don't rely on spam. Don't rely on your NIC card picking up everything, because it won't work that way. Get yourself, yeah, thanks, Tony. Get yourself a tap. They're not expensive, but trust me, if you want to see what's going on in your network, and we just finished a 2-day webinar with Viavi, Mike Caney and myself, and one of the first things we tell people is know your network. You know, your network is your child. And if you don't know what's on your network, you don't know who's in your neighborhood or who's in your house, you're just asking for trouble. And Wireshark, Brad, you said it. It is a awesome tool. Gerald and team have done a phenomenal job. And it grows. Every couple of months I hear something else about it, that someone's done this and done that. And that's another great thing about the community. If you have a problem and you don't know how to solve it, or you don't know what kind of filter to apply or whatever, the community is tremendously responsive.
Yeah, you know, they have just a long history of being very innovative, and if a problem arises or a capability doesn't exist, they sort of marshal support, and the right person gets involved and keeps that product, you know, really credible and useful. Has sort of IT challenges, not so much change, but evolve over time. And, you know, one thing I'd add to what you said, Tim, is that, you know, here at Viavi, you know, we're constantly saying, you know, the final arbiter, you know, metadata is a great thing. Metadata is the way to go. You build dashboards with it, what have you. But in the end, when everything else sort of fails, if you've got a tool like Wireshark and perhaps some back-in-time capability, you know, everything that goes on in the network, if properly instrumented, will be captured, say with a tap, and capturing that to some sort of storage appliance. It is a question of if. You will have every single event, good or for bad, yes or for no, on that network. And that, depending upon the circumstances, can be incredibly valuable.
Absolutely. And this is not an advertisement for Viavi, even though it sounds like one. I built years ago, when I was doing a lot of ISSA shows and a lot of stuff, and even my classes I teach, I put together a cardboard outline of the tools I would want in my rack. And the Gigastore, which is an incredible capture engine, was at the bottom here. And then I had my visibility tool, whatever that was, whether it was Wireshark or Observer or whatever. And then above that, I had my tap. And I had both copper and I had fiber. And to me, that's a really basic system that allows you to do just about everything that you need to do. And like Tony said, you want to, for your visibilities, you just want to cut those frames down so you can see what's important. That'll help you focus on the area of a problem. But having all of that backup information, whether using metadata or using syslogs or whatever, is incredible if you go to court, because now you have all of the evidence. And, you know, and again, you don't want to violate anybody's security, because it happens quite a bit, Tony, doesn't it? You don't want to walk out of the building with all the secrets.
Well, that's just it. But there is really a dual use case, you know, Tim and Tony. You both know that. Great for performance monitoring and management. You know, there's a problem, somebody complaining about an application. But whatever tool you choose, whatever kind of performance monitoring tool, they really do have that dual use case, as I said earlier, about knowing what's going on behaviorally with that traffic from a security perspective, and even more so from the standpoint of sort of optimizing the network. If you use a tool like Wireshark or a solution from Viavi, you can use that to sort of understand what's going on or not going on that should be going on, and start to make corrections and straighten it out before it's an issue. So beyond just sort of monitoring what's happening now, there's looking back and looking forward to see where it ought to be or isn't and should be. And so just something for the users, the people listening to this should think about, whatever they use, whatever tool. So
yeah, and you talk about training and knowledge. Of course, we have Wireshark. We're having Shark Fest week after next, or
the 6th, November 6th to the 11th.
Yeah, in Europe. And but if you look at Tony, Chris Greer, Mike Pinocchi, Mike Caney, all of these people that we know that are the gurus, okay, they do Wireshark training, and that is a fundamental, don't you think, Tony, of almost all of the diagnostic education out there?
Yeah, and just I want to just take 2 steps back, if you don't mind, because you guys had a couple of good points. I didn't want to interrupt. We were talking just a moment ago. You guys were talking about the taps and getting the data and analyzing the data. And I kind of brought this slide up first as a joke, but it's actually quite applicable. And it's the whole tap span thing. And I just want to get this out of the way before I forget. We run out of time. This is just a few slides from my presentation I'm going to be using for Wireshark Week, but it's just going to show anybody the obvious implementation of a span port. We've all done this a million times. You can span a port to a big storage device or your laptop. It doesn't matter. And your very basic commands depending on your device of choice. But the thing I want to point out here is you're only as good as whatever you're going to capture from. And it doesn't matter if it's Viavi, Wireshark, Microsoft Messenger. It doesn't matter what it is. If the data is compromised, corrupted, or not accurate, then the tool's only going to report what it saw, right? And that's the point of it. So I got a couple of pros and cons that, again, I'm going to be reviewing this again, but the pros are easy. People love span because you don't have to break a connection. And that is a very valid point. I am a troubleshooter, so I do use span, but I have to know when and where to use span. That's the point. It's convenient. It's fast to implement. No change requests. You don't have to get a cabinet open, get into a data center, and get change requests signed off and all that kind of nonsense. And it can be used to monitor remote ports locally using things like RSpan. So in the right context, these are all good things, right? But the point is some people don't understand the limits of the network. They do these things and they start digging themselves quite the hole. So on the con side of it, physical errors will be missed. And I literally worked on a problem just last week where the problem was physical level errors. And they were using a span port, and they had a tool that could measure physical level errors. It was a Fluke cable tester that could see errors. The problem was the tool could not see the errors because they used a span port. That's the point. So they thought they had all their bases covered, and they were missing something. The packet timings may be skewed, and I'll go a step further. It will be skewed. It's just a matter of how much. It'll add load to the network equipment, and I've seen those nightmare scenarios where people put a span command in or a monitor command, and the whole thing locks up, reboots, or worse, bricks. Equipment will have limits to the number of span ports, and I run into this all the time where I want to use a span port, and there's only one available, and it's in use already, and it's going to the intrusion detection gizmo, and you can't do anything about that. Span ports can be easily oversubscribed if spanning more than one port or a VLAN. When people say they're going to span a VLAN or 5 ports or 60 ports, I cringe, cry, and fall into the fetal position because that usually is a recipe for disaster, because there is no way you can jam 10 or 15 ports of data into one egress port. And most of the time, we're troubleshooting with things like laptops or desktops, which are marginal at best. People just don't know that. Yeah. And a really good tip to show people is the dropped packet counter in Wireshark. And nobody looks at that until it's too late. So they should be looking at that beforehand, right? And the last thing is it can cause more network issues if using a remote span, the same kind of idea. But I just wanted to go back to that point that it doesn't matter what the tool is, because I have clients constantly blaming vendor X, Y, Z, or what do you expect from Wireshark? It's free software. No. It's where you put that tool. I don't care what tool it was. It doesn't matter if it's a $30,000 analyzer or open source. It doesn't matter, right? So this to me, going back to the first question you asked me, Brad, this is another top challenge, is people don't understand tool positioning on their network. So the whole tool placement argument will result in the type of data you analyze or can analyze, right?
That's a good point, Tony.
But Tony, to be fair, there is one more pro for using SpanPort, because if you ever get your data through our court, at least you know why.
Well, there's that.
Tim, that was for you.
Thank you, Tony. And Danny, I just appreciate you stepping in there. One thing I was also going to say, if you're ever diagnosing real-time protocols like VoIP and video, I just don't at all subscribe using SPAN, because, like you said, it's going to be out of sync. And actually, what SPAN ports do is they groom the data when it's real time, and you wind up with, I have a friend one time from a bank called me up and says, "Our voice system sounds like crap, but I plugged in the SPAN port and looked at it, and it looks wonderful." And I said, "Congratulations, you have now gone into Disneyland, because you don't really know what you're doing with the tool." And so anytime there's RTP involved, I tell people, maybe step back a little bit and think about it. It would be amazing. I mean, if taps were $100,000 a piece, I would say, oh yeah, well, let's find an alternative. But they're not that expensive, so.
Well, and the last thing about taps that I don't have in my slide, because it's a very specialized application, there are some tools out there that allow you to be in line.
Oh yeah.
Which is like a tap, but the tool itself can be in line, and that tends to help people a little bit. But even when I do OptiView training and OptiView consulting for NetScout, and we have the tool on a customer site and we start talking about SPAN, and they are using a mirror port, I need them to understand all the pros and cons. And many times they didn't realize there was a con to it. They thought it was all upside.
Yep.
So again, it doesn't matter what the tool is. It really doesn't. And this whatever placement decision you make will affect whatever you plug into that port. That's my point.
Okay.
That makes sense, Tony. And it's just good to know the advantages and disadvantages. Again, you might say, look, we can't break that link. It's not going to happen. Okay, fine. But know that as you're looking at that data, you're not going to see any network errors. You're not going to see those problems. As long as you know that, like you said, then that's fine. You go in knowing that, and you understand the compromise and where you did it, and then you're fine. Or at least you're aware of what you're seeing is limited by the following reasons.
Hey,
So
Knowledge is wonderful.
I can't tell you how many times customers do a Wireshark trace with their laptop, and Wireshark complains about retransmissions and drop packets, and they bring it into vendor's B analyzer, and it complains about the same thing. So it looks like the network is dropping packets. Well, guess what? Their analyzer, their laptop, was overwhelmed, and it dropped a lot of data. And if they knew that, then they would realize this is a red herring. And then people get discouraged that they wasted all this time. And then they blame it on Wireshark, they blame it on Viavi, they blame it on NetScout, and they just stop doing it, right? And that's pretty well what I see.
yeah, thanks, Tony. So good, Denny.
Should we try to wrap this up? We just passed the half-hour mark.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thanks for doing this. So just in closing, I hope this was helpful. Tony and Tim, are really experts with Wireshark, and the information they're able to provide, can really enhance the experience. And what I would say is that as kind of as a final plug for Viavi, this is our third year of Wireshark Week. It's a great opportunity for folks to go out to our website, and I'm going to say the URL, observer.viavisolutions.com/Wireshark Week -. If you go there, just go out to our website and search for Wireshark, you will see the opportunity between November 6th and November 11th to sign up for any and all those sessions. Each day has that slide shows. We have a different expert. It's 99% Wireshark. We talk a little bit about Viavi Solutions. Great tools there to augment Wireshark. But the focus is on Wireshark itself. And Tony, being one of the speakers, can speak to the value as we've talked about for the last 30 minutes. Wireshark is a great first tool, and it should be in everybody's toolbox.
Good. And I just put up the slide that you want to put up. Do you want to say something to that? Okay, I'm going to put up.
Just you could just see the list there. We start all with introduction to Wireshark. We spoke earlier of Chris Greer, great source of information. And then from there we move on to other people over other days. We have TCP tips and tricks with Wireshark. Chris again speaking. Wednesday, analyzing web-based applications. A little bit different of a challenge there. Again, Chris. And then we'll have Mike Canny, another great source of information on troubleshooting file transfer protocols, very common. Again, a different way to use the Wireshark tool. And then lastly, the man of the hour, Tony Fortunato, will be in to talk about comprehensive network baselining and troubleshooting. And Tony will speak to using Wireshark in that way. And then, helping make your Wireshark adventures all the more productive.
Excellent, excellent.
And that's
Thank you, Brad.
Tony. By the way, we just did that video, the 2 webinars, Tony, and that's so important. Baselining your network, knowing what is in your network. That's going to be so cool. And I can't wait to participate and be there and raise Cane as usual.
Looking forward to it, gentlemen. Thanks so much, Denny and
Thank
Tim,
you,
for having
Brad.
me on.
Thank you, Tony. Good seeing you again. Thank you, Tim. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Brad, come back more often, please.
I will do. I'll take the challenge.